3 years ago, 7 days before the wedding that was supposed to mark the beginning of forever, she disappeared with the one person he trusted like blood. No warning, no clues, just a bland message on his phone at 2:14 a.m. "This isn't what I want. Please don't try to find me." That night, the sky was cloudless, indifferent. The city was still, but his world fell into a silence so thick it smothered every sound, even his own breath. He stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The dress, the rings, the family flying in from different continents. It all became nothing more than clutter in a life abruptly rewired by betrayal. She had left with Eric, his best friend since college. The man who gave the toast at his engagement party. The man who helped him choose the ring. People told him to be angry, but anger didn't come right away. What came first was disbelief, then a dull hollowness that made food taste like air and sleep a rare accident. He disappeared from his own life for a while. No grand gestures, no public drama. Just quiet, precise removal. He changed cities, deleted numbers, closed accounts, restarted. And now, 3 years later, on the 16th floor of a downtown office building with polished glass and the scent of eucalyptus in the elevators, he stood in the reception area of a law firm that bore his name. He had rebuilt his life like a machine reassembled without its original parts. Efficient, polished, functional. Marriage wasn't even on his radar until he met someone who didn't ask him to forget, only to exist. She was sharp, subtle, unlike anyone he had known. Their relationship was built in the shadows of what had been burned down. It was imperfect and unromantic, but it was real. They didn't have a fairy tale wedding.
No speeches.
Just a document, 2 pens, and silence that didn't need to be filled. But fate, if such a thing exists, is cruel in its timing. On a late Monday evening, as the city glowed with static light and his car idled in the underground garage, he received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end didn't ask for him by name. It said one sentence, flat and confident. "She's back. She's looking for you." His chest didn't tighten. His breath didn't hitch. He just listened and hung up. That night, he didn't go home. He walked for hours through streets that felt too narrow. He didn't know what he was more disgusted by: the idea that she thought she could return, or the twisted curiosity gnawing inside him. 2 days later, he saw her. Not in a dramatic scene. No thunder or music. Just a high-end grocery store. She stood near the wine aisle, wearing something expensive and hollow. She turned, saw him, and smiled as if she'd been expecting him. As if the last 3 years had been a minor misunderstanding. He didn't speak. She did. "I knew I'd run into you eventually," she said, like someone commenting on traffic. "You look older. It suits you." He waited for an apology, for any trace of remorse. But her eyes were dry, her smile too intact. And then she added, "You married her. That's interesting." He didn't ask how she knew. He just watched her, remembering the way she used to lean into him during thunderstorms and how that memory now felt like fiction. The silence stretched. She took a bottle off the shelf, inspected it like she was browsing memories, then looked up at him. "We should talk." He said nothing, just turned and walked away. That was supposed to be the end. It wasn't. He told no one. Not his wife. Not his friends. He buried the encounter like a corpse under glass, visible but untouchable. Yet every step he took for the rest of the week felt slightly misaligned, like his body remembered something his mind was trying to suppress. 3 days later, she sent a letter. Handwritten. Delivered to his office, not his home. No return address. Just his name on the envelope in the unmistakable slant of her cursive. Inside, 2 pages. Not an apology. Not regret. It was a confession, laced with arrogance and riddled with omissions. She claimed Eric had used her, that he was manipulative, possessive, violent. She said she'd made a mistake, but she was young, confused, pressured. She wrote, "I didn't know what I wanted until I lost everything. And now I want my life back." She didn't mention love. She didn't even mention him by name. He read it once, then again. Then he set the paper on fire in the steel trash bin beside his desk and watched it burn until only a curl of ash remained. Still, the letter had cracked something open. That night, he returned home late, pretending it was traffic. His wife looked at him with those eyes that always knew when something was off. But she didn't press. She never did. Her way of loving was quiet, observant, restrained. And maybe that's why it stung so much when he caught himself measuring her silences against Alina's noise. The next morning, the front desk called. A woman was asking to see him. She wouldn't leave a name, only said she had a scheduled meeting. He knew. He walked down, found her sitting in the lobby in a sleek, dark outfit that made her look like she belonged in another life entirely. She stood the moment she saw him, too fast, too eager. 5 minutes, she said. Just 5. He didn't agree. He just stared. Look, I know I don't deserve your time, but I need you to hear me. You had 3 years, he said finally. You used them to disappear. Used the rest to stay gone. She exhaled, as if bracing herself for a hit she believed she could absorb. Eric's dead, she said. The words hit like cold water, not because he cared, he didn't, but because it explained the timing. She wasn't back because she missed him. She was back because her safety net had snapped. He overdosed in Lisbon. I had to identify the body. She watched him carefully for a reaction, but he gave her none. I lived in hell, she said. You have no idea what I've been through. He tilted his head. No. But I know what it feels like to be erased. She blinked. For the first time, her confidence faltered. I was wrong, she said, lower now. I know I was, but I see you now, who you've become. And I see the life we could have had. He laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so monumentally absurd. You don't see me, he said. You see a version of me that still belongs to you. He doesn't exist anymore. She took a step closer, reckless. But he could. I remember what we were. We were fire. He interrupted. No. You were fire. I was the house you burned down. The silence that followed was suffocating. She stared at him like she was trying to find purchase in a reality that had already rejected her. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe not now, but you will. He stepped back. No, he said. I already did. I'm just done repeating it. He walked away, but even as the doors closed behind him, he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. He told himself that was the end, again. That her reappearance was nothing more than a final echo of a past already silenced. But the truth had teeth, and it bit into the edges of his days. There was a shift, subtle but persistent. He caught himself watching the door at restaurants, scanning crowds like a man expecting an ambush. He wasn't afraid of her, but he didn't trust the version of himself that used to love her. That version had scars shaped like trust. By Friday, the shadows she left behind became weight. He found himself rereading old emails, ones he hadn't deleted for reasons he couldn't explain. They were mundane. Flight confirmations, grocery lists, silly messages from nights when the world still made sense. And tucked in between them were lies he hadn't recognized as lies when they were written. Plans she canceled, calls she missed, things Eric was helping her with. It had been happening long before she left. And still, knowing this didn't bring peace. It brought a different kind of rage. Quiet, refined, like poison in tea. That weekend, his wife noticed. They were at a friend's gathering. A small rooftop dinner filled with laughter and glasses clinking against the skyline. She leaned toward him during dessert, her voice low enough to carve straight through the noise. You haven't been here all evening, she said. Where did you go? He didn't answer. Not fully. Just gave a tight smile and changed the subject. She didn't push, but something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or worse, suspicion. The next morning, he woke to an envelope on the kitchen table. Printed photo inside. Not new. 3 years old. From the engagement party, the last one before Alina vanished. He hadn't seen this one before. She was laughing with Eric in the corner of the frame. Too close. Her hand on his chest. Her eyes not on the camera, but on him. There was no note, no signature. Just the image. Left where he'd find it. She was toying with him. It was deliberate. She wanted him off balance. She knew where he lived. She knew how to get in without being seen. The intrusion wasn't physical, it was psychological, and she was good at it. Better than he remembered. He didn't tell his wife. Instead, he had a private security firm sweep the building. No bugs, no cameras, no signs of a break-in. But they confirmed something else. Someone had accessed the building's service elevator using an old code. One that hadn't been deactivated. One she would have known from the days when they were planning their life together here. That night he drove. No destination, just speed and empty roads. He let the city pass like a blur until he found himself parked in front of a small, run-down motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where secrets paid cash and no one asked names. He didn't check in. He waited, watched, and after 2 hours he saw her. She emerged from a room wearing sunglasses despite the darkness, a suitcase in hand, and a phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't hiding. She wanted to be seen. He got out of the car, walked across the lot. She froze when she noticed him, but only for a second. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. He didn't waste time. "What's the game?" She smirked. "There's no game. I just think you deserve the truth." "I don't want the truth," he snapped. "I want distance." She stepped closer, voice softer now. "You want revenge. You're just too clean to admit it." He didn't flinch, but inside something shifted. She saw it. "I'm not here to ruin you," she continued. "I'm here to remind you that you're not done with me." He leaned in, voice like ice. "You don't exist to me anymore. Not as a memory. Not as a regret. You're a cautionary tale I've already outlived." She tilted her head, studying him. "You say that like you've moved on. But you're here, aren't you?" He walked away. But she was right about one thing. He was there. He didn't sleep that night. The image of her standing in that motel parking lot clung to him like smoke, impossible to wash off. He stared at the ceiling for hours, rehearsing arguments he never voiced, confronting a ghost that refused to stay dead. He wanted to hate her cleanly, to seal her into a box labeled past, and bury it. But hatred requires clarity, and she was anything but clear. By morning, exhaustion had carved into his face. His wife noticed, of course. She watched him stir his coffee but not drink it. Watched him scroll through his phone without seeing the screen. "You're somewhere else again," she said. He didn't answer, didn't lie, just let the silence speak for him. And that somehow was worse. Later that day he received a package at the office. No return address. Inside, a USB drive. He plugged it in with caution, half expecting something malicious. But all it contained was a single audio file. He hit play. Eric's voice, from a hidden recording. A conversation, raw and unfiltered, taken during a time when betrayal was already in full swing. "Don't worry about him. He won't know until it's too late. He trusts you blindly. That's the beauty of it." And then her voice. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I want out. He's just safe, predictable. You think I want to spend the next 50 years watching him organize his sock drawer?" Laughter. Not from Eric. From her. He listened to it twice, then deleted the file. But the damage was irreversible. He sat in his chair for a long time, staring at the skyline, wondering how much of his life had been a lie told with a smile. And still, he said nothing to his wife. But inside something snapped. Not with noise, but with precision. A single, deliberate crack across the foundation. He had questions now, not for her, but for himself. Why had he ignored the signs? Why had he forgiven so quickly the first time she made a small betrayal, dismissing it as a misunderstanding? Why had he proposed when, deep down, he feared she didn't love him the way he loved her? That night, he went back to the motel. This time, she wasn't surprised. She opened the door before he knocked. "Change your mind?" she asked. "No," he said, stepping inside. "I'm here for answers. Not apologies. Not memories. Just answers." She sat on the edge of the bed, crossed her legs. "Ask. Why him?" A pause. Not hesitation, calculation. "He was exciting," she said. "He made me feel like the version of myself I used to like. And with you, everything was so permanent, so suffocating. You could have just ended it." She shrugged. "Cowardice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just easier to vanish." He paced. She watched. "You left like I was furniture," he said. "Like I wasn't real." She smiled, thin and cold. "You were real. That was the problem. You made me feel seen. And I hated it." He stopped pacing. "You're not back for me," he said. "You're back because you're alone." She didn't deny it. "That's not a crime." "No," he replied. "But thinking you still matter to me is." The silence between them was thick. She stood, walked toward him. "You still carry me," she said. "I live in the part of you that looks over his shoulder, that checks every message twice. I'm in your trust issues, your late nights, your empty answers." He didn't move. "You don't love your wife," she whispered. "You respect her. You admire her. But she doesn't haunt you. Not like I do." And just like that, he realized what she was doing. She didn't come back to rekindle anything. She came back to ruin what was left. To be the one thing he could never fully clean out of himself. He stepped back, opened the door. "This is the last time we speak," he said. "Whatever power you think you have, it ends here." She didn't argue. She just smiled. "I never needed power," she said. "Just a place to live in your head." He left. But the worst part wasn't that she said it. It was that she wasn't wrong. He didn't return home that night. Instead, he drove until the sky began to fade from black to bruised gray, pulling over near a coastal overlook where waves smashed against stone with mechanical fury. He stood there, watching, motionless, trying to match the rhythm of something that wasn't inside him. Because everything inside him felt out of sync. Every breath, every thought, every word he hadn't said to the woman who slept beside him each night, waiting to be let in. When he did return, she was awake.
No acquiescence. No dramatics.
Just a cup of coffee left for him on the counter and a look, steady, too calm, that told him silence had worn thin. He sipped the coffee out of obligation, not thirst. Finally, she spoke. "Is it someone from before?" He didn't pretend not to understand. He nodded. "She came back. And you let her in." He met her eyes, and for the first time in weeks he didn't lie. "Yes." She sat down, not because she was weak, but because she didn't want to collapse. "You should have told me the moment she showed up." "I didn't want her to matter," he said. "But she does." It wasn't a question. He tried to explain. About the unfinished endings. About the open wounds she'd left behind. That he didn't want Alina back. But he wanted something he couldn't name to finally be over. Closure, revenge, clarity, whatever it was pulling him toward her like gravity made from past mistakes. "I don't need you to choose between us," his wife said, standing. "I need you to be honest about what still owns you." He didn't answer because the answer wasn't simple. It wasn't even singular. There were fragments of his former life he hadn't buried deep enough, and now they were surfacing like bodies in thawed ice. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just walked upstairs. That night he stared at the ceiling again, just like 3 years ago. But this time the silence had a witness. He thought it would get easier. Didn't, because Alina wasn't done. The next week, she sent flowers to his office. Not roses, orchids. The same kind she'd once told him were her favorite because they looked delicate but were impossible to kill. The note attached simply read, "Still beautiful even in winter." His assistant raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He didn't throw them out. He left them on the window ledge, staring at them like they were a ticking clock. Then the call started. Unlisted numbers. No words. Just silence. Heavy, deliberate. She wasn't trying to reach out. She was reminding him she could. And it worked. She'd figured it out long ago. He didn't respond to chaos, but to control. So that's what she did. Made her presence subtle, quiet, precise. She didn't shout. She whispered, and every whisper left a crack. His wife noticed again. "You're fading," she said one night. "You're here, but you're not with me." He looked at her, really looked, and realized what he was doing wasn't just about Alina. It was about self-destruction in slow motion. A man standing in a room he built, lighting matches out of habit. "I don't want to lose this," he said. "Then stop letting her steal you piece by piece." He nodded, meant it, but deep down he knew. This wasn't over. Not yet, because something inside him still wanted the last word. And Alina knew it. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Not at the office this time, but at his home.
No envelope.
Just a folded sheet, slipped under the front door sometime during the night. There was no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside were 5 lines. "He told me you'd never forgive me. He said you needed me to be the villain. So I let myself become her. But you never asked why I agreed. Meet me. One last time. No location. No time. Just a challenge disguised as confession." His wife read it too. She picked it up from the floor before he did. Held it between her fingers like it was toxic. "She won't stop," she said. "Not until you make her." And he knew it was true. Not because Alina loved him or wanted to return to who they once were, but because she couldn't stand the idea that he had moved on without needing her redemption. That afternoon, he took a risk. He called a number she once used years ago. Disconnected. He tried another, one she'd given to a mutual friend in a moment of recklessness. This time, someone answered. "Speak," she said. "No more games," he said. "Where?" She gave him a time, place. An old theater, abandoned now, where they once snuck in during their early days, playing children in a world that hadn't yet grown teeth. It was sentimental, calculated, poison dipped in nostalgia. He didn't tell his wife, not because he was hiding it, but because some battles had to be fought in silence, with no witnesses to what might bleed out. The theater was colder than he remembered. Dust lay thick on the velvet chairs, and the air reeked of mold and memory. She stood near the stage, dressed too elegantly for the decay around her. "You came," she said, smiling like it was a victory. He didn't sit, didn't approach. "This ends here, does it?" she asked. "Because you keep returning, just like me. I came to understand something, that's all." She nodded, slowly. "And what is it you need to understand, exactly?" "Why I left. Why I never looked back." "No," he said. "I know why. I just wanted to hear you lie one more time." Her smile cracked. "You want closure," she said. "Fine. I'll give it to you." She walked toward him, deliberate and slow. "I loved you once, but it was a small, scared love. Like a candle in a room full of wind. Eric, he gave me escape. Not because he was better, but because you were too much." "Too much what?" "Too good," she said, her voice twisting. "Too safe. You didn't need fixing. And I needed to break something to feel real." He laughed. Not with humor, but disbelief. "You thought I wouldn't break? You were built to endure," she said, softer now. "You still are. That's why I hate her. Your wife. She gets the version of you I only ever saw glimpses of." "You chose to leave," he reminded her. "I did, and I'd do it again. But don't pretend she hasn't felt the cost of that." That stopped him, because Alina wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was handing him her version of the truth like it was a weapon, daring him to use it. "I don't hate you," he said finally. "I just wish you'd been someone else." She stepped back. "I can live with that." He turned to leave, but before he reached the doors, she called after him. "Do you ever think about what we could have been?" He paused, just for a second. "No," he said. "I think about who I became because you weren't there." And then he walked out for the last time. Or so he thought. 2 weeks passed. There were no letters, no calls,
No sightings.
Alina had vanished again, but this time the silence felt heavier, like the breath before a storm, not its end. He should have felt peace, relief, closure, maybe, but instead, there was unease that pressed into the quiet moments of his life with unnerving familiarity. His wife had retreated into her own silences. She didn't ask what happened at the theater. She didn't demand explanations, but she moved through the house like a visitor, polite, distant, efficient. She waited not for answers but for evidence, and she was finding it in the spaces between their conversations, in his distracted glances, in the way he looked over his shoulder without realizing it. One night, she left a question on the table like a loaded gun. "Is she still in your head?" He didn't answer, not because he didn't have one, but because yes, she was, and not as a temptation, not as love, but as a rot he hadn't finished cutting out. And the shame of that answer was worse than guilt. It was truth, and truth was always the sharpest weapon in their house. That week, the fallout began. First, a project at work he'd been building for over a year collapsed, investors pulling out after a sudden, unexpected withdrawal of funds. He traced it, found the trail. It led to a shell company tied to an account that, 3 months ago, had been registered in Portugal. Eric's last place. His jaw tightened as he put it together. She hadn't come back to reclaim the past. She came back to infect the present. Quietly, strategically, with precision he'd once mistaken for passion. She was sabotaging him. But this wasn't about money. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about erasure. About proving that even after death, Eric could still take something from him, and she would be the vessel for it. He didn't go to the police. That wasn't how this needed to end. He sent her a message, short, direct. I know what you did. If you want a war, I won't play fair. No reply. But 2 nights later, he found her waiting outside his building. Dressed in gray. Expression unreadable. You always were the strategist, she said. But you underestimated how long I've been planning this. He didn't invite her in. You think you're powerful because you survived me, but you're still reacting. Still chasing resolution like it's something I owe you. You owe me nothing, he said. But you crossed a line. She didn't flinch. I know. Why? Because you left me behind, she said. Not just physically, emotionally, completely. You didn't keep any part of me. That was the point. And I can't let that stand. It was then he saw her clearly, not as the woman he once loved, or even the manipulator she became, but as something else entirely. A person who needed to matter even as poison. You're not part of my story anymore, he said. You're just the footnote I almost erased. Her smile was hollow. Then I'll make sure you never forget me. He stepped closer, not with fear but finality. You already made yourself unforgettable. Now I make sure you're irrelevant. She stared at him for a long time, and then she left.
No threats. No screams.
Just silence. But he knew it wasn't surrender. It was escalation. And the game wasn't over. The unraveling came slowly, like thread pulled from a finely woven suit, one loose stitch at a time. First, his wife stopped speaking to him at breakfast. Then she began staying out later, not lying, but not explaining either. She had her own silences now, her own secrets, and he couldn't blame her. He had opened the door to ghosts, and they never left quietly. Then came the news. A supplier backed out of a major contract, citing a reputational concern. Subtle, but enough to make board members nervous. Whispers started. Emails arrived laced with polite suspicion. He traced it again, and again the roots pointed back to the same shell structure. Someone was bleeding him dry, not financially, but reputationally. Calculated wounds that didn't kill, just weakened. Public perception, trust, consistency, the intangible assets of a man with influence, those were under siege. He sent another message. You've made your point. What do you want? This time, she responded, a seat at your table, or I burn it down. That night, he sat in his study. Lights dim, door closed, reading her words like a prophecy. Not a threat, a promise. She wanted reinsertion, not just into his world, but into the world he'd rebuilt without her. She didn't miss him. She missed the access, the proximity to relevance. She wasn't just waging war. She was clawing for identity. He realized then, it wasn't revenge she was after. It was continuity. She wanted to prove she was still part of his narrative, still capable of shaping it. The next day, he gathered what she wanted most. He called a press contact, released a brief, cold statement. Regarding recent speculation, I confirm I had a past relationship with a woman now known to be targeting my personal and professional life through coordinated deception. I have no ongoing connection with her and will pursue legal action if necessary. No names, no drama, just truth with teeth. By the time the article went live, he was already prepared. Emails surged. Support poured in from expected and unexpected places. Sympathy, outrage, offers to help. And among the noise, one name stayed absent. Hers. She didn't respond publicly, but the silence after the blast was the loudest message yet. His wife read the statement. He found her that night in the kitchen, phone in hand, screen still open to the article. You said it was over. It is. No, she said, setting the phone down. It should have been over, but it never was. I didn't want this. I know, she said, but you fed it. He leaned against the counter, exhaustion radiating from his bones. Tell me what to do. She looked at him, not with anger, but something colder, resignation. You don't get to ask me that. Not after choosing her shadow over my presence for this long. She walked away, up the stairs. He didn't follow. Instead, he poured a drink and stared out the window, wondering how long it would take before Alina struck again. and if she would care who else bled in the process. Because she'd already set fire to the bridge. Now she wanted to watch him drown in the smoke point 2 days after the public statement. She appeared again. Not in person, but through a quiet, coordinated strike. A video, leaked to a minor online outlet, but it spread like gasoline on dry wood. Grainy footage, old, likely from a phone Eric once carried. It showed him and Alina in some hotel room laughing, drinking. Nothing explicit, nothing illegal, but just enough to confirm everything, just enough to humiliate. The date stamp on the corner was the worst part. 5 days before the wedding. The night she was supposed to be with him, finalizing details for a future she never intended to live in. The headline was cruel. The runaway bride. A past too ugly to hide. Within hours, the comments flooded in. Sympathy for him. Condemnation for her. But she wasn't the one under scrutiny anymore. He was, again, for not seeing it coming. For being a man who built success atop denial. He should have been angry, but all he felt was fatigue. A sharp, slow burn in his chest that reminded him just how far she'd gone to remain in control. He didn't respond publicly. He didn't call her. He didn't even speak to his wife, who had taken to sleeping in the guest room without a word. He just sat in his office, door closed, blinds drawn, staring at the monitor as the video replayed in silence, over and over, like a wound that refused to clot. And then the final blow came. His assistant entered quietly, placing an envelope on his desk. "No return address," she said. "Marked urgent." Inside, another letter. But this time not from Alina, from Eric's sister. It read, "She told us everything. After he died, she came looking for sympathy. But all she did was lie. I thought you should know Eric kept a journal. And in it, he wrote about how scared he was. Not of you, of her. Said she had a plan. Said she needed to break the clean one to feel alive. He meant you." There was a copy of a single journal page enclosed. Scrawled, messy, but readable. She says he's too perfect. That she needs to ruin something pure just to feel real again. I told her it was cruel. She said that's why it has to be him. He put the page down slowly, feeling a new kind of chill. This wasn't just manipulation. It had been a blueprint. She hadn't reacted to emotions. She'd orchestrated his destruction like a composer writing a symphony of collapse. And he danced to it. For years. He stood up, left the office, drove in silence. Not home, not to her, but to the only place that still held the weight of the lie, the old apartment where he and Alina once lived. It was vacant now, abandoned like a gutted memory. The door was unlocked, dust thick, air stale. He stood in the living room where she first said, "Forever." Then he took out the journal page, held it to the light, read it one last time, and then, without ceremony, he lit it with a match and let it burn on the floor. He wasn't going to wait for her next move. He was going to make the final one. Not with fire. Not with revenge. With erasure. He was done being the haunted man. It was time to become the one she feared. He began with silence. Not the passive kind she expected, no retreat, no sulking. This silence was surgical, strategic, and final. He cut ties, rewired networks, and closed every door she could slip through. The personal became professional. He reshaped his company's infrastructure, replaced compromised vendors, and brought in a new legal team to audit every inch of damage she'd planted. Then he filed a private injunction. No press release, no drama. Just a quiet, lethal move. Restraining order, defamation cease and desist, and a case built from every traceable thread she'd left behind. She wouldn't be able to use his name, his image, or even a whisper of association without legal consequence. She had screamed for a stage. He took it away. And then he went home. His wife stood in the doorway of their bedroom, eyes tired but sharp, arms crossed. Not in anger, but in waiting. "Is it done?" she asked. He nodded. "For her? Yes. And for us?" He didn't respond with promises. No speeches, no desperate pleas for forgiveness. Just honesty, the thing that had nearly rotted in him through all the noise. "I let her write too much of my story. I thought by holding on to the pain I had power over it. But I was wrong. I was just giving her space to live." His wife looked at him for a long moment, then turned, walked into the room, and left the door open behind her. It was enough for now. The next morning, he went to the ocean, the place he'd once driven to in the middle of the night, lost and bitter. This time, he stood there steady, calm. He took out the last thing he had left of Alina, a photo taken before the collapse, before the wedding. They were smiling in it, young and unaware of how thin their future really was. He stared at it. Then he let the wind take it, watched it spin, curl, and disappear into the surf, a ghost finally uninvited. And as he turned to leave, for the first time in years, he didn't feel watched. He felt alone. And that finally was a beginning.